Well, Michael, let's get into something a little different. We're talking about preparations for the coming years and whatnot, but what about these people who have disabilities of all kinds? And we're hearing so much about the prevalence of Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's to
what
give you an idea.
With that?
Okay, with Alzheimer's is, I think Alzheimer's is used a lot, and it's getting to be where Alzheimer's is the buzzword now. So if you hear the word Alzheimer's, you immediately connect with what that is, and so I can talk about that, and because I've seen it and I've dealt with it. What ends up happening is first there's the early stages, and the early stages is what happens. You know, it can happen when you're in your 50s, it can happen in your 60s, and you get to 70s, it can still happen. So that's where you forget things and you're having trouble and everyone's starting to realize that something's off. And then you get the diagnosis where, yes, you're having problems. So it's a type of dementia. When you get into that and you get that early stage, it's easy to see what's coming at that point because I can predict the future. Because I know what the disease does to people and how it affects them. So if you take a typical person, and it's usually a husband and wife, and one of them gets diagnosed, and because apparently the males are the weaker sex, it's usually us who get it, and so then it's a woman who's in her, let's put them in their 60s, early onset, and then they're still together, and they are in their 60s, both of them, so they're looking forward to retirement, but they get this bad news. So this couple then, the level of treatment is going to, as the years go by, it's going to be ramped up. So in the beginning, the wife can usually handle most of the things because there's good days and bad days, and the good days outnumber the bad. So they have times where somebody's a little confused and they're having trouble. There might be a little bit of shouting. There might be a little bit of confusion for smaller portions at the time. But as the years go by, the bad days start outweighing the good days. And at a certain point, there's usually, they have to bring in more care. So the person has to then hire on like a housekeeper to come in and clean the house periodically that as continually goes up. And then you have a number of times where you have to have meals brought in. Meals on Wheels program is great for that. You then have adult daycare that can help to relieve the caregiver. So when that happens, eventually that amount of assistance still isn't enough because the person who's left behind, they have that person is usually in their 60s, pushing 70, and they're now starting to deal with a person who is digressing into the mental stage of about a 7-year-old, which is really a lot to ask somebody. Even I have young kids and I can barely keep up with them, let alone having lived my full life and then trying to deal with it. So, and you know, this is a physical adult. I've heard stories of people with somebody they've been married to 50 years and they're standing over them with a knife because they have no concept of what's going on, or the person goes out into the street because they don't know what's going on and they just walk out, and so then there's this constant fear, there's this constant anxiety, and eventually because of the disease you can't stay in the home anymore. There's just no amount of care that can work. You have to have the full-time care, and prior to that, you know, maybe you have some respite care or a nurse come in, there's medicines that need to be done, there's showers that need to be taken, there's all these things that slowly build up, and in that time, once they've exhausted all that, usually there's even a home evaluation done through like the DHS and things like that. So there's levels and levels and steps that everyone goes through, and then eventually you're in that final step. And in that time, the costs are going up, the time is going up, your life is wrapped around that. And people have come into me and they're exhausted. They can't take it anymore. And the only thing that I can say is, well, here's your next step. Here's your next step. Here's what's happening next. And it's heartbreaking in that there's people that they just don't know that even some of their options are available. Just knowing that Meals on Wheels is there, just knowing that there is adult daycare, and they're all around, but because you're in this world that it's hard to see out of, and it just takes, you don't have to call me. There's a number of places you can call, but just try and get some help. So that's what is sort of that's the plate and table that's been set in order to, how do I deal with that as best I can. And a lot of times, if you are worried about that, or if you get that early diagnosis, then it's a little easier, but it's a step-by-step, and knowing that things will change.
Now, with Alzheimer's, there is no preset schedule.
No.
Because everyone progresses at a different level, and speed. I have watched them where they have retired from their jobs, and these funny little things start happening, and it may progress rapidly so that they no longer know you, or it may just sit in one spot
for years,
for almost forever, and then all of a sudden it picks up and you're gone.
Yep.
What does the survivor do?
Well,
how does the survivor survive?
The survivor survives for a long time for the grace of God, and that is because it is nothing short of horrible to go through it. You're watching the person you love deteriorate, and if they can get through it, it's amazing, and if they can do it as best they can, it's even better. And what they have to do, and it's tough because you're dealing with somebody all the time. You have to think about yourself, and you feel selfish enough as it is, but you do need to take a few steps to make sure that you're okay. And a lot of it has to do with there's certain things that you can do. Now, if you're young enough, you can look into long-term care insurance. And I'm not an expert in that, and I don't deal in it, but I know if that's an option, you could look into it. Now, eventually, if you hit a certain age level, it's just going to be prohibitively expensive to try and purchase that. So there's kind of a wall to it, but it's an option. If you're young enough and you can look into it, that's a good option because it'll pay for those long-term cares.
This is what I was going to say. You'll hear about people buying life insurance, and they should be buying
long-term care insurance.
Long-term care insurance.
Yeah. And you want to do that early, and you want to look into it a lot. Don't just sit down with somebody and say, well, I'm going to buy this insurance. You want to shop around.
But also in there, do they have such a thing as a policy that has long-term insurance plus a small burial fee?
It depends on the policy because each one, insurance.
They're all different.
They're all different. They all cover certain things. And what you want to be looking for is what does it cover? And you want to get more than one policy. I would say you want to have at least 3 and put them down right next to each other and check to see which one covers what and what is most important to you. And if it has that burial fee into it, you can look into that. Now, you can also do prepaid funeral expenses through your local funeral home, and that's actually good even if you're not even thinking about long-term care. That's a great option. Again, I'm not going to say who to go to or anything like that. I don't know because I've never actually done it, but
that's all right. We won't mention names anyhow.
I have heard though from people that have done that, and not the person who did it because they're passed away, but the kids that have done it.
Yes,
they said it is so much easier.
Because you are preparing, there's something there so that if and when they notice that if and when they pass on, there is something to take care of their end expenses.
And with that, it's really common sense too. When somebody, a parent dies or even a spouse dies, that's pretty much the worst week you're going to have.
Right.
Either that your whole lifetime or for that year or it's going to be a bad week. And when you are in that week, you don't care. You don't want to think about anything. You just want to go and be done with it. because it's such a miserable week. And you're being given choices and you're being given options and you're not thinking in your best mind. Now, you take yourself out of that worst week and you get to shop around, you get to look around and say, well, what funeral home would work well for me? What is a good option? What is a good plan? What is the most cost effective? All these things that you can do. And then once you have that, you can lock it in at a certain point, and it's great because then once the time comes, all you have to do, call the funeral home and it's done. And you're on autopilot and you just cruise and you're done. And I really recommend it. Do shop around, just like the insurance. Try and do 3 or 4 and get them all lined up.
Well, let's take another break so you get your breath back.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.